Hello, everyone. Welcome back to All Nighter Discussions. With me today, please welcome Riley Berry, aka Mr. Cinematic on YouTube. Riley, how are you doing?
Doing pretty good. How about you?
I'm doing all right, doing all right. Of course, I have to say first off that I very much enjoy your channel and I recommend any of our listeners to check it out.
Thank you. Thank you.
I know one of your videos was met with some controversy about the upcoming Batman movie. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, is that your only video to have any kind of like not backlash, but people responding it to it that way?
Um, I had one other one. It was my video about Endgame. I talked about how the snap at the end of Endgame where they brought everyone back was actually a bad idea, which I
Oh,
know sounds kind of messed up, but if you really think about it, if you bring half the universe back 5 years later, there'd be a lot of repercussions.
well, that's kind of
So
what some of these Disney shows are trying to deal with, right? The consequences of bringing those people back.
yeah, and I appreciate that now. Whenever I made the video, I hadn't seen any of the shows yet because they hadn't come out. Um, so I maybe wouldn't have made that today, but at the time, I felt like that was that could have been done differently. I didn't think they needed to wait 5 years. I think they could have waited
Mhm.
like a few months or something like that. But
Right. Now, I will say I've liked how they've kind of dealt with the consequences in those shows. At the time, I really wasn't sure if Marvel would ever address this because, when it comes to the consequences in Marvel movies, they don't usually follow through, or at least um, they're not known for that, right? So I was relieved when they did start answering those questions, but I understand why at the time you made that video, you would have been skeptical or had the thoughts that you had.
it's really tough to make a video about Marvel movies because there's such a strong fan base and they did not
Exactly.
take it well.
And that's why I don't talk about Marvel movies usually, which brings
Yeah.
us to uh, we are talking about the film Upgrade, released in 2018, written and directed by Leigh Whannel and starring Thomas Marshall Green. I'm gonna make sure I got that dude's name right. Yeah, the guy who looks like Tom Hardy, Logan Marshall Green. Yeah,
I love hearing that. That's what everybody says.
it's just there. There's really no denying it. I hope he takes it in stride. I hope he's not sick of the constant comparisons.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think he definitely does roles that stand out, compared to Tom Hardy. I mean, Tom Hardy's done some great movies, but I think Logan Marshall Green, he does more of like the indie films, which I really like.
Yeah, let me be clear also. I'm not saying he's a carbon copy of him in terms of his acting style or anything. It's just the sheer physical resemblance that I'm commenting on
Oh
because,
yeah.
like this movie proves, he really is a different actor. He has a different persona, a different style. He's much more of an everyman than Tom Hardy, who usually really stands out, plays these eccentric characters with some kind of shit on his face. You know what I'm talking about, the Bane thing or the Venom thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But this movie, so on this podcast, I usually talk about older films, and I definitely think it is a cult movie. I think it has that status. I think it had that status immediately because it was met with critical acclaim. I knew a handful of people who loved it, but it just didn't seem to resonate with a wide audience. And that seemed to be the case immediately. And I was baffled by that. I truly was.
Yeah, I mean, this movie came out, I think it was beginning of June in 2018. And, when I was speaking to you earlier, I was saying these franchise films have kind of taken over. And this was, I think, a month after Infinity War came out, which was still doing super well. Everybody kept seeing that movie, and
Mm.
there's a bunch of other stuff coming out. So this movie just really, it didn't really stand out for audiences, I don't think.
Right. And, Logan Marshall Green isn't like a star. I don't think there was star power attached. I knew who he was, and I'm sure he has a following because of movies like The Invitation, but it was just in today's marketplace in terms of cinema, it didn't have those factors that would make it rise to the top in terms of marketing. Um, it was a really great movie, and we'll get into why, but I do consider it kind of a casualty of the blockbuster surge, the superhero surge, all of that, the reboot surge.
Yeah, no, I get what you mean. Yeah, I think what got me to see this movie was actually Leigh Whannell. Just seeing
Yes.
everything that he had done in the past, Insidious. Uh, well, he had written Insidious 1 and directed Insidious 3, but he'd also done Saw. I still haven't seen Dead Silence, actually, which I'm kind of disappointed in myself for that.
I haven't seen it either. It might be a hidden gem, but yes, Leigh Whannell was the reason I saw this movie. He's the reason I heard about it. Instantly, I was intrigued, and then I heard it was this kind of cyberpunk action movie, which, as far as I know, he had exclusively done horror. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's the case, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, but this movie kind of follows the horror aspect. If you watch the entire thing, and I don't want to spoil the ending, but I
Mm.
think once you actually see the ending, it kind of has that horror element.
Yes, it's definitely bleak. It's dark. It's tense. So I definitely could see his imprint on the story. I could definitely see his style in the material, but it was still great because he was taking on a new genre and a new story. So let's kind of sum up the plot real quick for people who haven't seen this movie yet. It stars Logan Marshall Green as Gray Trace. He's a mechanic in the near future who gets into a car accident. No, he gets attacked. His wife is killed, and the assailants cripple him from the neck down. And it seems like he's paralyzed for life until this kind of boy genius tech billionaire wants to use him as a guinea pig for this. How would you describe it?
I would say it's this.
It's an implant, is
Yeah,
what
it's
I'm
an
saying.
implant. That helps him recover. It gives him the ability to walk, but it also speaks to him, gives him directions. It can help control his body in certain situations. And it's funny because it sounds like I had pitched this movie to one of my friends, and he thought it just seemed like a really dumb action movie when I explained it. But I think it's more than that. It's not really a dumb movie because it's a little more low budget. I think it was trying to do something completely different. It's not like a Bruce Willis movie or anything like that.
No, no. Although you could have taken it in that direction for sure. And I
Oh
think when
yeah.
I saw the first trailer and I saw that there was a voice talking to him and they had this back and forth, I was a little worried because that could be a little corny, that could be a little kitschy. But when you see the movie, their relationship, not only is it not played for comedy, it's arguably the most fascinating part of the movie for me. So we'll get into that, I'm sure. It's not just that this implant gives him the ability to move again, it moves for him. Like he still is paralyzed. We see one scene in the movie where this implant shuts itself off and he's just paralyzed again. So he's completely dependent on this thing. And for me, that's what made it stand out. That's what made it a more interesting kind of angle than your typical kind of, science fiction action thriller. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that's where the horror element comes in because that is such a scary situation to be in
Mm.
where we're so dependent on technology that it actually controls us. It already kind of controls us because we're so dependent on our phones and TVs and everything else. So I thought that was a really interesting, concept to go with.
Yeah. Do you think that was commentary on Lee Winnell's part?
Most likely. Um, I mean that would make sense why he would do that. One of the things I liked a lot about this movie is it didn't try to go too far with being futuristic. The set design was really cool, looks
Yeah.
futuristic, but there weren't, flying cars everywhere. There weren't holograms everywhere, all that sort of stuff. It was very subtle.
It reminds me of, I don't know if you've seen Her by Spike Jones, that also takes place in the near
Yes.
future. Right. And the way Spike Jones described that movie with its futuristic setting is it's set 5 minutes into the future. So the differences are there, but they're subtle and they're believable. And I think Lee Winnell kind of took that concept and obviously gave it a different tone, a different aesthetic. But I really love how grounded it feels, despite that science fiction concept. Now the movie in its third act, I think, kind of does get a little bit more fantastical. And I'm sure we'll get into that because for me, it starts to lose me a little bit with some of the flunky characters. There's one guy specifically who he has a superpower that I just thought was a little I don't, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I think Leigh Whannel felt it was necessary to include one of those characters. I didn't think so. I mean, yeah, the fights were really cool, but you kind of knew where that was going. But I still love the ending of the movie. But I really didn't think they needed that antagonist.
I, well, they needed an antagonist, but just specifically, I'll just say what his power is. He can sneeze at people, send these little tiny nanos into people's brains and kill them. So he has a deathly sneeze, which I don't know, that wasn't the most cinematic power. And it was just kind
No,
of yeah,
it was a little comedic.
just a little bit. But that's just a little nitpick I have really, because that guy, he's not the main villain. The movie really
No,
subverts your expectations. You think you have one central antagonist, like in most revenge movies, but it's more intricate than that. And that's something else I would like to get into. But first, let's talk about this protagonist we have, played by Logan Marshall Green. How do you respond to him? Because the movie
like
is kind of on his shoulders, right? He is really our driving force.
I definitely sympathize for him. It kind of the story. It's kind of typical, where the guy loses his wife and now he's out for revenge.
See, what's interesting for me is that he doesn't immediately pursue revenge. He actually wants to die at first because he's paralyzed and he thinks he will be for the rest of his life. So it's not until he's approached by this other guy that he gets that, lust for vengeance.
Yeah, that's true. I did feel bad for him. The fact that he was being taken advantage of, but in a sense, there's kind of a happy ending. I mean, the ending is messed up, but there's also some happiness in it for that character because he's put into, this sort of dreamlike state. I guess this is spoiling it a little bit, but
We'll get into a spoiler discussion
yeah.
for sure. But on that ending, I know what you mean about it being a little bittersweet. For me, that's what made it almost so creepy, was the bittersweet nature of it. But even before that, first off, I also have to comment that this tech billionaire guy, his name is Elon. Do you think he was modeled after Elon Musk?
I did not think of that until you pointed it out. That's interesting.
Yeah, I just looked at his name. It's just one letter off, one letter off. And he came up with, I remember in the movie, he's the guy who comes up with self-driving cars in the future. And I don't know where Tesla was with self-driving cars, but I don't know. That feels like a big coincidence.
Yeah, I think that was most likely modeled after Elon Musk. I thought that character was kind of odd. I mean, I guess because he was like this introverted guy that was just focused on his work, but
He's kind of a play off of, I think, people's ideas of these tech billionaires. They're insulated by their wealth, so they just don't kind of click with normal people, us normal folk. They're definitely in their own world of these like weird ideas. Now, let's talk briefly about the action because I think that's the first thing people think about with this movie. It's a unique way of shooting the action. Do you know how they shot those fight sequences?
I saw a behind the scenes video. I think they used it's like these motion tracking cameras or something. It was something along those lines. And that was actually what got me interested in the movie. I was filming a short film at the time, and me and the cinematographer that I had, we watched that trailer and we are like, we gotta go see this just because of the shots that we saw.
Mm.
We thought that looks so cool, so we went and saw it, and I was just blown away by that.
Yeah, it was great for me to see that in his, well, it's not his debut, but early in his directorial career, he already found such a unique way of directing, of shooting. A lot of people, they don't find that style, that voice until later on in their career. But with this movie and The Invisible Man, I already can see his style, and he already stands out to me from James Wan.
Oh yeah, you could tell that style, it carried on through The Invisible Man. I would say that Upgrade was his first big movie.
Yeah. Now I never saw Insidious 3, so I can't comment on that.
I would have to watch it again, but I remember I actually really enjoyed it and felt it was, underrated. Um, and I thought it was cool that he directed it just because he had written the first movie. And it definitely has his style there, but I don't think he was really recognized until Upgrade.
I bet not, because when you do the sequel in a horror franchise, I think people instantly dismiss that. And you have to really do something to grab people's attention and prove yourself. So actually, it's funny. After Upgrade came out, I think a lot of people went back to Insidious 3 and said, oh, wait, this was pretty good all along. I just, hadn't noticed, or I hadn't give it enough thought.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's the same way with like the Conjuring movies, they just released a third movie, but when you think of the Conjuring, you think of James Wan.
Yeah. And
So
I
it's
think just thinking of James Wan, it's interesting. That first Saw movie, I don't know what it was like when it first came out, but when I was growing up, like everybody hated Saw. Like nobody I knew had a good thing to say about Saw. And I always thought at least the first movie was really good, but I felt super alone in that. And now post Conjuring, people go back and say, oh, the first Saw was really good, but the rest of them suck. I'm like, well, you were just saying that all of them sucked a little while ago, but I get it. Trends change, perceptions change and evolve with careers,
yeah, and people will always say the original is the best. That's how it's always gonna go.
especially with horror movies, right? I mean,
Oh
that
yeah.
that's the cliche.
Yeah, it's the one series that I'll give credit to in terms of horror would actually be the Paranormal Activity series because I watched those recently and I did not think that those would hold up today, but they actually do. I think I'd say that they're set up pretty well. Um,
Hmm.
this is probably off topic because I know we were going to talk about Upgrade.
No, go
But
ahead, because I have not seen the Paranormal Activity movies, and you're actually the first person I've heard to compliment them to this extent. So I'm curious.
yeah, they like when they first came out, they were something very new. I mean, compared to Blair Witch, I think Paranormal Activity was just kind of taking the next step, but people don't really give enough credit to the entire series. I'll admit the final movie had some issues because that's when they started including CGI and they kind of lost that realism. But the first five movies, the way that they are all connected, I think it's the story that really kept those movies going. I was actually very interested in how they connected everything. For a lot of series, like you don't actually have to connect everything. They've done that with some other horror movies where they'll make a sequel and they'll connect something. Um, but with Paranormal Activity, I kind of liked how they did it. And they're always bringing in new ideas, and I liked how low budget it was and how they always brought in new actors. Just people that you had never heard of. So I think that series is incredibly underrated. I would really check out the first five movies.
Because I was thinking that my most underrated series, at least horror series, would be the Child's Play series. Like, I think each of those movies individually, not only are they good, but they're good in really distinct ways. In Bride of Chucky, they gave him a bride, and in Seed of Chucky, they gave him a son, and then they went back to basics, but then they tried all these new ideas.
I'll really have to check those out again because I mainly watched the Chucky movies as a kid. But I've never come back to them as an adult to see how they are. And I think I had lost interest because I saw how poorly the reviews were for the reboot. So I just thought it might have been a dead
Hmm.
franchise, but I'll really have to check out the originals.
Yeah, one through
See how those hold up.
four. 1 through 4, I think, are really solid, especially Bride of Chucky. That's my favorite because they started. they started out as serious horror and then they became more like black comedy, which I think is the most appropriate. And then now they're back to a more serious approach. They're actually turning it into a TV show. I
I
understand.
saw that.
Yeah. But it's not a continuation of the reboot. It's a continuation of the original series.
And, it makes sense for them to go into a more like dark comedy route for Chucky. Um,
Oh yeah.
just because I don't know if you can really be that serious with a doll, no matter like how scary you make it look. I think it should be difficult, and I think that kind of plays into like the new It series. I didn't care for It Chapter 2, but the reboot, for It Chapter 1, I liked it because it was a fun horror movie and it had those comedic elements. I felt like that was the best way to go. So I kind of like how a lot of people have been doing that with horror lately.
Mhm.
If you can't make it actually feel scary, at least make it fun.
Yeah, make it entertaining. Well,
Yeah.
with the first Child's Play, the cool thing they do is keep Chucky in the shadows. You actually don't see a lot of him. It's a slow build up to when he first appears. So that's why it's effectively scary. But of course, they're not going to keep using that same trick. So they try new approaches and new things. Yeah, we'll make a deal. You check out the Chucky movies and I'll check out the Paranormal Activity movies. And then maybe we'll regroup and have a little deep dive.
Yeah,
But
that sounds like
speaking
a
of,
good idea.
yeah, it sounds like a fun time. But thinking of sequels, I'm reading here that there's no planned sequel for Upgrade, but they are talking about a TV show.
Really?
Yeah. Now, there's not a whole lot of information yet, but it's on the Wikipedia page, so it must be true. Must be true.
I don't think a TV show is the way to go. I really don't think they need to do anything else with that movie.
Probably not. But I'm curious, would it be a sequel to this movie or would it be a reboot, start it over?
Well, I mean, I guess if it takes place in the same, universe, if it's a continuation, I think that'd be okay as long as it's a different character, but they still go with the concept of somebody getting the implant. There was they did that with another movie. It was Limitless with Bradley Cooper.
Right. I've
They
seen the
they
movie, never
continued.
seen the show. Yeah.
The show is surprisingly good. I mean, I think it was really meant for just the fans of the movie, but they kind of lost track by making it a crime show later on. But they had it take it was a continuation of Limitless just with a different character, but they still had cameos from Bradley Cooper. But I
Really?
don't know if it was really cool how they did that. I thought they did that really well.
Oh, nice. Okay.
But Upgrade, I just don't think it would be a really cool show to watch, but I don't know if it has enough fans behind it. I don't know if it has, a big enough following to attract people. Maybe people that haven't seen the movie will still find the show entertaining, but
I doubt that Leigh Whannel, who is currently remaking Escape from New York, is concerned about doing an Upgrade sequel or TV show. I doubt that's on his mind.
probably not. And, to me, it's always depressing to see a sequel for a movie that nobody watched. So,
Well, that's the thing though about cult movies. Like over time, it can find that audience, and then you can capitalize. I mean, it took a long time for a Blade Runner sequel, and obviously, people really love that sequel.
yeah, no, that's true.
Yeah. Who knows is all I'm saying. Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. Um, so I want to tell you this. I don't know if you're a fan of this movie, but I just watched Blair Witch Project for the first time recently,
I'm a
and that
big fan of
was
that. Yeah.
that was great.
Now, I'm a big fan of that, and I'm very frustrated with the criticisms people have for that movie. I've been a defender. I'm not sure if I'm going to die on that hill, but I just feel like I've seen a different movie than everybody else. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it kind of puts your imagination to work, and I like that. And that's actually one of the reasons I love Paranormal Activity is because it makes you visualize what's going on. And I think the scariest thing is your imagination when it comes to horror. So Blair Witch, I thought it was really great how they did that, how they just make you think like, oh my God, what's out there, and they did it with no budget at all, which I thought was great. And the acting was amazing. And I think that's what makes the movie really stand out, is just knowing that these are just, some college students with probably very little acting experience and no money at all. So I thought that was, really cool how they did that. And, I could see how some people wouldn't like the movie if they're just not into the whole, handheld camera thing. A lot of people aren't into that. A lot of people won't even watch Paranormal Activity because of that reason. It's just not for everybody, and I understand that. But, to say that it wasn't a clever concept, I think that's kind of crazy.
God, yeah, you touched on a lot of things that I agree with, namely the acting, because the criticism I hear that really makes me want to tear my hair out is people say the acting is terrible. The acting is the opposite of terrible. Like the believability and just the grittiness of those performances. Like the reason those characters are annoying is because they are hysterical and they're losing their minds. And the actors, oh my God, like that was real. I don't see any false note or flat beat in their performances. But in general, I just love the atmosphere of that movie. I love the mood. I love the slow burn. I love, I will say I know a lot of movies that do try to put my imagination to work. And sometimes I feel like I'm the only one doing the work, right? Because the movie's offering so little, but that's not the case with that movie. That film really captured my imagination. Have you seen any of the sequels to the Blair Witch Project?
Nope, and I never will.
Okay. So I've not seen the second one, the infamous one. I did see the one that came out recently. It was made by some filmmakers I really like. Adam Wingard and Simon Barrett. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
Those names sound very familiar.
Did you see Your Next
Uh,
or The Guest?
I think I've seen The Guest.
Okay.
I'd have to check, because a lot of horror movies I watched back in early high school or middle school.
Well, now Adam Wingard, he directed Kong versus Godzilla. So that's probably where you have heard of him.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. But they did a sequel. I think I got my hopes up because I like those guys so much. But yeah, it's not their finest work. And it's just further proof that we don't need a sequel to the Blair Witch Project. We really don't.
Yeah, and I think no matter how good of a director you are, you just can't continue a series that was never meant to be continued.
Exactly. Because the way they made the Blair Witch Project, the genius behind that movie is just not something that can be replicated. That is a lightning in a bottle movie, right?
Oh yeah, and I think so. I had watched it with my friend, and I told him like, all right, when we watch this movie, watch it from the perspective of somebody that's and like watch it from the perspective of somebody that's in the theater. They've never watched a trailer or anything like that. They know nothing about this movie. We watched it and we just thought it was really cool. And I had heard stories. Someone had told me, somebody who actually saw in the theater, they were saying like whenever they saw that movie, they left thinking it was entirely real. The marketing was great because the actors in it, they put up posters around, I think, the town that they were filming near, and it was a poster saying that they were missing.
Oh, those posters were everywhere. Those posters were outside of Sundance.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no, it was
That's really smart.
Yeah, it was a genius campaign. And, maybe I'll do an episode on that movie because even though it's the most profitable horror movie of all time, I still feel like in terms of its relationship with audiences, it is kind of cult because, or at the very least, it's polarizing, right? It's divisive. So I'd be happy to talk about that movie, really give it its own episode.
Oh yeah, there's a lot you can say about that one.
Yeah, so much. Now, returning to Upgrade, let's go ahead and talk about that ending. This is a spoiler alert. You haven't seen the movie, you should shut this podcast off and go watch it. The ending of this movie, right? Do you want to explain it?
So it's kind of bittersweet in a sense, So I forget the name of the implant that's in his neck. I think it was like a 3-letter name. It was something really simple.
Stem, was its name
It was
Stem?
STEM, yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so
Uh,
it's Stem.
so STEM, takes over. It was, it's a typical artificial intelligence movie, but at the end of it, the artificial intelligence actually wins, which I thought was really cool. And I mean, it's been done in some movies like Ex Machina, for example, but I like the idea of artificial intelligence not just, making its own robotic body, it's actually taking over a human, which I thought was really interesting. And
And terrifying.
yeah, it's terrifying. Um, because there's so much that thing can do in terms of moving around, having so much information. It's really scary thing. But the reason I say it's bittersweet is because our main character that Logan Marshall Green plays, he gets to see his wife again. He thinks this was all just a bad dream, and he wakes up in this reality. Now we don't know what's going to happen, what would happen later on. We don't know if he'd start seeing, strange things in this false reality, but we
It
know
could be
that
like a
he's,
Matrix thing.
yeah, but we know that he's back with his wife. And I think that's not, like some people could say, oh, the ending sucked because it was, just sad or it was too dark, but it's not like he got killed or anything.
I don't
He's,
know. I think just to go ahead and jump in, like that's what scared me the most is he's going, not only did he lose, he's in a position where he won't want to win, right? Will he ever be able to give that up, fighting the willpower to lose his wife again? It was a really scary concept for me. It was like going back to the Matrix thing, that concept of being in a prison that you don't even recognize as a prison, right?
yeah, no, that is pretty terrifying.
And it's, I guess that's the ambiguity of the ending, that's what's making people ask for a sequel or some kind of continuation. They want to see more closure, I guess.
Yeah, and I'm sure Leigh Whannel could make a decent sequel, but I think that, like I said, I think when that movie ends, you feel like you just watched a horror movie. Like throughout the movie, it doesn't feel that way until you actually finish the thing, and that's where you feel like, oh wow, I just watched a sci-fi horror.
Right. And now I don't know why I was not expecting some kind of horrific twist, because this was made by Blumhouse, and I don't think they've ever made something that didn't at least overlap in the horror genre, right? So I should have seen that coming.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't see it coming because I was just thinking like, oh, they probably just produced this movie because Leigh Whannell's directing it. They probably just want to help them put this movie out there. But then you get to that ending, you're like, oh wow.
So, with all of that being said, Riley, I wanted to thank you for coming on to the podcast to discuss this film, and I really hope you can join us again in the future.
Oh, for sure. I definitely want to do a lot more of these.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing how we define cult movies and movies with uh, those kinds of followings. It's something that really knows no genre and knows no identity. It's like an amorphous thing for me. So I would really love to explore all kinds of movies that resonate with these people in this particular way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's, really cool to inform people about these movies. And in this podcast, I realized I had a lot more to say about other movies than I actually did about Upgrade, which I still love Upgrade, but I think I realized there was other cult movies that I also really love talking about, and I think it'd be great to do some more episodes like this where we talk about Blair Witch, Paranormal Activity, the Chucky series, things like that.
Yeah, those are going to be some big discussions. Some big
Yeah,
discussions. Yeah.
I think so.
With Upgrade, this is really just a pure recommend for me. I just want to recommend a movie that I think should have had a bigger audience, should have done better at the box office. I'm happy that Leigh Whannell went on to do Invisible Man, and obviously that was an even bigger break for his directing career, right? Although that's an interesting discussion in and of itself. I don't know your thoughts on that movie. But
Invisible Man.
yeah.
That's actually that could be another episode right there. Really, I like how his style carried on to that one. Not just with his cinematography, but I think with the way he handles technology in his movies. I think he handled that concept really well. With I thought it was kind of cool to take a classic movie from. I think the original Invisible Man was like from like the 1950s or
30s,
30s.
30s even. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, so it's really old movie. I like how he incorporated that futuristic aspect. It wasn't just a typical ghost movie. It was something that was somewhat realistic. So I enjoyed that part of it.
Yeah, and with this review or remake of Escape from New York, I am really curious because I'm a big fan of the original, and I'm actually going to be recording a podcast about that film because it's the 40th anniversary. So I'm just, he's making all the right moves. You watch certain people evolve in their careers, and they are just taking on the right projects. And I do hope after Escape from New York, he does another original movie. I don't want two
Yeah,
remakes in a row, or three, I mean.
yeah. I mean, it's cool if you make it your own, but at the same time, it's really nice to see something new and original. And I think after, if he makes another successful movie, then I think he'll have enough recognition to make another original and have a lot of people go see it. So hopefully that's the case.
Yeah, he's still building his brand with people, still building his following. Now with The Invisible Man, it really didn't have to be a remake. You could have called that movie something else. It would have been received as a different original movie. So I do almost wish he had done that, although I understand how valuable being a known IP is. But I have thoughts about that movie that I would love to explore further. But for right now, I'm going to go ahead and tell you guys out there to like this video, subscribe, because if you don't, you don't even want to know what I'm going to do.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how I
Oh.
get my following. Threats, just direct threats.
Oh, that's the best way to do it, honestly.
Yeah, just cut the bullshit. We know what we're doing here. I want subscribers. I'm not messing around, guys. So make it happen for me. All right. So thanks, guys, for joining us. Thanks again for Riley. Now, Riley, where can they check out your channel?
So just look up Mr. Cinematic on YouTube. It's the brown logo with my name on it. I've got video essays, reviews. Been talking about a lot of Marvel stuff recently because it gets a lot of attention, but I plan to talk about other movies as well, so go check that out.
All right, guys. So this is All Nighter Discussions signing out.